Hey, what's up guys? JB here. I'm back again today with another Versus video. And honestly, I wasn't expecting to have the material to do another one of these so soon. But in a surprise this week, our global original is yet another high-powered lightning slash unit with everyone's favorite bunny girl from FFBE, Esther here, who was finally released in War of the Visions today. And the debates are already happening out there. Is she as good as Cloud? Should I pull if I already have Cloud and Ibarra? And that's what I'm going to try and tackle here today, versus style. So let's do the rundown. I have more than 36 points of comparison to go through today. So let's settle the score and truly see which high-powered lightning slasher is carrying the biggest sword. Let's dive in. And as we always do, let's start the table by comparing their innate stats. And we'll just quickly touch on some points here. Now, the first thing jumping out is that huge HP advantage for Esther. She has almost 1,200 more hit points. And Esther's hit points currently have her slotted as 10th overall in global for that category, just edging out Charlotte, so she's in great company there. To back up her raw HP, she's bringing in 6 defense and huge physical resistances here, especially for Slash and Pierce at 25%. Now notably, she has 15% strike resistance here as well, which is definitely pretty rare in the game. Now one concerning thing here for both Cloud and Esther is they both have that negative magic resistance, especially Esther with that negative 15%, which actually does go to a negative 23% with one of her main passives. So definitely a big oof there. Now Esther has the edge as well in dexterity by about 24 over Cloud, while Cloud brings the crit rate advantage at 20 versus 7. Their luck, on the other hand, is identical at 224. And this was an area I really thought that Esther would actually get a bit more than that, with that thief sub job she has. So definitely, I was a little bit disappointed in that 224 value for her. In terms of the attack values here, Esther is beating out Cloud at 572 to 504. This is just a little bit misleading though, and we'll talk a little bit more about that once we get into the battle. In terms of ailment resistances, they both have some things to like. They both have that paralyzed resist. Cloud has that disable resist, which is really nice, and Esther brings in that small resistance to charm, which can actually be pretty good too. Overall though, from a pure innate stats perspective, I do give the overall edge here to Esther. Very nice starting stat block here, and definitely pointing her towards a physical bruiser type role. So let's actually move into the battle and see which one is going to come out on top. Alright, round 1, and this is the damage round. Fight. In terms of the main damage stat, Esther actually appears to have a pretty large advantage here on face value with that 68 flat attack lead. However, I'm going to give this category to Cloud for 2 reasons. He actually has a small lead when it comes to base attack stat. He also has double attack up passives available to him, and he's going to have one of those equipped in almost any build that you can think of for him. His 30% attack passive that he gets from Nightblade, for example, will net him about 127 attack, which will then surpass Esther's base value here pretty easily. Cloud's also going to gain an advantage here when we're talking about damage types. Notably, he has access to both slash and missile damage, while Esther, on the other hand, only has slash attacks available to her. Alright, so moving on, and when it comes to innate accuracy, and again, I calculate this based on their starting dex and luck values, plus any potential passives that they might have. Now, Cloud here has a substantial edge with that 178% innate accuracy, and that's including his Nightblade passive. Now, you could potentially even take a second accuracy passive with him. He has that Ranger Lore skill available to him as well. If you really wanted to sort of boost up your accuracy to very, very high levels, that would get him up to 203% and actually make him one of the most accurate units in the game. However, you do really need to sacrifice a significant amount of defense pen to do that, so I think it's more of a niche build. Esther, on the other hand, is a bit lacking when it comes to accuracy, sadly, as she's coming in at only 157% here based on her innate stats and passives. She does, though, have some accuracy enhancing skills in her main kit that will help her substantially, and we'll talk a little bit about those, as we go through the battle here. When we're talking about damage mods, and again, we leave the limit break out of consideration here, Cloud actually has a couple of attacks above that large 200% mod, including a massive 240% on his cross slash. Esther, on the other hand, has nearly all of her attacks at or below a medium 165% modifier. She only has Taunting Blade from her Paladin sub, giving her that 200% mod. Now that skill is a massive 44 AP cost and brings a hate effects along with it. So in autoplay, it's something you may even have turned off, depending on your tank setup. So she is, I would say, lacking a bit in this category, and Cloud has a clear win when it comes to damage modifiers. On the Imperil front, Esther has two key parts of her kit here. She has her Limit Break, which provides a 38% slash res down on the target, while her Stormbrand attack provides a 20 single target resist down. That's an Imperil that's still fairly rare in the game today, not a lot of units have access to it. Cloud, on the other hand, has his Braver ability, definitely one of the better low-cost attack skills in the game, very high damage. But this one actually only provides a 25% slash resist down, definitely giving Esther a big edge in this particular Imperil category. Now, in terms of defense penetration, Esther can actually get up to 90% with a 40% constant from a passive and 50% from her Limit Break on that particular attack. Cloud, on the other hand, has a 60% always on from his passive and can get another 20% from his concentration Nightblade ability. I'm going to give Cloud the edge though on this one because of that 60% that he has always on for him. What about slash resist penetration though? Now, neither of these units actually have any available to them innately in their kit. I'm going to throw Esther a bone here on this one, though, because she's coming in with her new sword that can give her 30%. Technically, you could run this sword on Cloud if you wanted to, and it actually would be pretty powerful on him, but let's be real. We know Cloud wants to be wielding that Buster Sword. In terms of max range, Cloud has the advantage here again. If you're using his Ranger sub-job, and along with his Ranger Lore passive, he can actually get up to 7 max range with his Barrage skill, and up to 6 range with his Sharpshoot. Esther, on the other hand, is topping out at 5 range with Taunting Blade from her Paladin sub. When it comes to 100% hit, I'm going to give this one to Cloud again. There's really no comparison. He has an AoE guaranteed hit with his Triple Slash, as well as a missile-based guaranteed hit in Sharpshoot. Looking at Esther now, and technically she does have one as well within her Thief sub-job, but it is conditional with that Sneak Attack ability. It requires you to be behind the target for it to have its guaranteed hit effect. So definitely not ideal there. I will say, though, that she does bring her Stormbrand ability that brings a flat 30% accuracy modifier along with it, so that is pretty good as well. So considering all these points, I think it's pretty clear that Cloud has a definitive edge when it comes to the damage category. Okay, on to round 2, and this is the utility round. Now, like seemingly all modern damage dealers that are released these days, both of these units come with a barrier break. I'm going to give the edge to Esther on this one though, because Cloud's is coming off of his Limit Break, which he can only use a single time, and it costs a lot of AP for him to use, while Esther's is only costing 20 AP and she can use it 3 times. Now, the next category I have here is AP Restoration. Now, one of the unique things about Cloud's kit is that his party buff will give units 10 AP back when they crit, and that definitely can be very helpful in terms of sustaining the team's damage output, and especially for an element that tends to crit a lot like Lightning does. What about that coveted counter chance reduction skill though? And Esther is going to get a clear win here. Her Bolting Slice attack is a large 3x3 area of effect and completely shuts down counters by 100% prior to hitting. And this is just going to be amazing for turning off all of the reflex, damage mitigation, or retaliation type counters out there, and is a key piece of utility in the current state of War of the Visions. Now, I do have Ailment Infliction marked as even here. Cloud does technically have access to a 50% chance to stun, which is actually pretty powerful, admittedly. It's just coming from his main job sub-job, which I think rarely sees use, due to the overall utility that his other jobs provide. Aside from that, though, they both just have access to a couple of ailments that they can inflict at the standard 25% chance. Definitely not a huge focus for either of these units, and neither of these units are ones that you'd want to run at high faith anyway to up the chances there. Alright, so some other notable ones here. Now, Esther has a 43% attack break on her low-cost 14 AP Bolting Impact skill, while Cloud doesn't actually have any way of reducing the enemy's damage. Moving on, they both have a crit evade break that they can deliver, which is going to effectively enhance their ability or the team's ability to land crits on the enemy. And that's something they both very much want, not only for the additional damage that they're going to be able to deliver in that scenario, but for the extra effects that they have on their skills that, are going to be crit conditional. I'm going to leave this category even though, because neither of these skills are what I would consider part of their main kit. Cloud's coming off his high cost Limit Break. Again, he can only use that once. And Esther's coming from her Precursor sub job, which, in most scenarios passives, I don't really see that being used, when she has access to Immortal Spirit coming from Paladin. I do kind of like that sub-job though in general, and there may be some niche or sort of fringe cases where you might want to use it, so keep it in mind. All right, my last note here is access to modifier up boosts. Esther doesn't have one in her kit, and she really doesn't have any damage-related buffs that she brings that she can apply to herself or others. Cloud, meanwhile, has access to concentration, which provides 40 slash attack up to himself and the party. Definitely a buff that he's going to be able to do work with, and Esther as well would love to have. Very, very close round here, but I'm going to give this round to Elena, just barely squeaking it out here, I think. All right, on to round 3, and this is the support round. And anyone out there who has Cloud knows that he's kind of a lone wolf, so could be a tough round for him. Let's see. And the first one I have here is their access to various, resistance buffs, whether they're buffing up their own resistance or buffing up the party's resistance to various types of damage. And they actually both provide pretty nice support here with both party and self-resist up buffs. Cloud has his double resist, which provides 25% to missile and pierce damage, and that's from his Nightblade sub-job. He also has Punisher mode, which is an ability that gives him a large 25% area resistance to himself. Now Esther is kind of flip-flop from that. She provides a 15% area resist buff while having a 20% missile, pierce, and strike resist that she can provide to herself, and that's her Storm Guardian ability. Both very, very good here, so I'm going to call this one even. All right, next up we have debuff resistance. Cloud doesn't have access to this anywhere in his kit, while Esther can activate a 30% debuff resistance to herself when she crits on her Surging Storm attack. And I think this one actually could be pretty interesting to combo with some of the Trust Stone passive abilities that would essentially make it a coin flip to apply any element or damage type imperils onto her. All right, next category is drain attacks, and I'm going to call this one even. I think they both actually have some nice abilities here. Esther has her Storm Brand, which restores 20% of her health when she crits, while Cloud has an AP drain that he has within Nightblade. Both of these I think are very useful, depending on the content. Unfortunately though, within the auto game, Cloud will never really use that ability, but any mode where you're able to manually control him, I think it's very, very powerful. All right, next one here is a big one, and that's access to Immortal Spirit. Esther gets access to this through her Paladin sub-job. Now, luckily for everyone out there trying to kill Cloud, he doesn't have access to this in his kit. He's just sitting there waiting to pull out his bow and reflex you again.
Oh. Well. Oh, come on.
What about any active accuracy buffs that they have? Esther's Storm Guardian does actually give her a 30% accuracy buff to herself. As well, she has that 30% accuracy mod to her Storm Brand that we talked about earlier. Now, generally, this isn't really something that Cloud needs in his passives because he has 2 different guaranteed hits, but I'll give this one to Esther. All right, so last few here. In terms of crit buffs, Esther doesn't have one, while Cloud has a 20% buff that he can apply to himself. On the defense and spirit front, Esther has a couple of different abilities, including Sentinel, that she can use to up her defense and spirit totals. Cloud, on the other hand, doesn't have any. In terms of attack magic up buffs, Cloud has an attack 40% buff that he can apply to himself and the party. As we mentioned earlier, Esther doesn't have any sort of damage-related up buffs that she can provide, so she doesn't have anything there to speak of. And the last one here is access to any barriers in their kit. Now, Esther has a very nice buff that actually provides her a 50% physical barrier, and that lasts for 3 hits. Cloud, as we know, he doesn't have access to any barriers innately. I think they both would actually probably prefer a all damage barrier or a magic barrier, so definitely a team building footnote there, but in terms of innate access, Esther definitely gets the edge here. So overall, when it comes to supporting the team and oneself, Esther gets a clear and decisive win here, and is definitely going to take round 3. All right, so we're on to our final round, and this one is X Factors. And this is a round where we look at some items which may be easier to glance past or overlook, but when added all up, they represent a nice additional value. Now, admittedly, I was reaching here for a few of these, but let's take a look at it anyway. Now, from a chaining perspective, all of Esther's attacks are unfortunately single hit. This was a little bit of a disappointment for me, honestly, when considering how prolific of a chainer that she was in FFBE. Cloud, on the other hand, has a triple slash plus for a 3-hit attack, and definitely giving him the edge in that category. When it comes to counter abilities, this was sort of another small disappointment for me when it comes to Esther's kit. She has actually 2 versions of the same skill, which is Paladin's Guard. And I do like that one. It's pretty good. It's fine. It leans into that physical bruiser nature of hers. But I think it's always kind of a bummer when you have 2 identical counters in your kit, and game, and they didn't give her anything new for her new unique precursor job. Definitely a missed opportunity there. Cloud, though, famously has his reflex ability, and this is just a better overall counter in my book, and definitely one of the best counters in the game. All right, my next category here is innate tankiness, and I had to put this one in here because this is really what Esther is all about. You know, really none of the other categories were coming right out and saying this, but I think everything there added up, including that base stat advantage that we talked about, is all sort of leading towards this particular category. It all just translates to Esther being a much tankier unit. Cloud actually has a little bit more resistance to magic, but again, they're both negative when it comes to that category, so it's not really a big talking point, you know. At the end of the day, Cloud really can't compete whatsoever when it comes to tankiness. Esther has that immortal spirit, she has her barriers, she has the defense and spirit buffs, she has that huge innate hit points advantage. Most of the resistances there are much higher than what Cloud's has as well. Her innate tankiness is so good in my opinion that, you know, pitted up against physical-based enemies, she could definitely be a solid tank. I don't really advise using her in that role. You know, she has some tools to be able to do it, but I don't really consider it her best role. I do think, though, that she could be used maybe as a distraction or maybe an off-tank. All right, so moving on here to TMRs. Now, neither of their TMRs I really loved, if I'm being honest. If I had to choose one, I'd probably choose Esther's, though. The effect, I think, is a little bit better than Cloud's acquired AP up one. And Esther's provides a 30% crit up buff to the caster, as well as 100% defense debuff resistance. What I'm mostly pinning this on is actually the base stats of these particular TMR pieces. Esther's being an accessory that most units can wear and having that rare 6 base agility on it, while Cloud's is an armor slot piece with sort of average armor stats. Now, in terms of items that they can equip, you know, Cloud can wear plate armor and he can wear helmets, while Esther can wear cloth armor and she can wear hats. While there are definitely good pieces on both sides, I think there are two very nice items that Cloud has access to in both Glinting armor for that keen blade effect and Kane's helm for that haste and move up effect. I absolutely love both of those TMRs. I think that their effects can be pretty game changing. And you know, those TMRs are in addition to armor pieces like Brigandine and Knight's armor, Plat helm. So I definitely give Cloud the edge here in this particular category. Now, from a cost perspective, Cloud has a 10 lower cost. He comes in at 90 versus 100 for Esther. So that's going to help him marginally in those cost restricted areas. Maybe it allows you to fit in a different VC or Esper or maybe potentially even a higher cost unit. So sort of considering everything here, and you know, this is another very close round, but I think when it comes to X factors, I do have to give this round to Cloud. Alright, so the battle of Esther vs. Cloud is now complete. And you know, I've been studying these units' kits for the past 6 or 7 hours now, and these were sort of all the points of differentiation that I could come up with. And after all of that, it was definitely a back and forth battle. You know, we had it at 2 rounds to 2 here. So I'm definitely calling a draw on this one. But hear me out. It's very similar to when I was comparing Ranan and Ibarra. It's just 2 different flavors that we're looking at here. And it comes down to how you actually want to build your team. What may be best for that moment or what you're trying to counter. Do you actually want someone who's going to command the front line and take hits? Keep dishing out damage like Esther? Or maybe do you want more of a high damage finesse unit, someone who is really good at dealing with evade units like Cloud? Now specifically on that evade front, you know, Esther can no doubt be built in a way to deal with heavy evade units, but you're going to have to really invest into it and maybe forego equipping a damage up armor piece or a mitigation based armor piece in order to do it. Now she does have that sneak attack that we mentioned earlier, but you have to give up Immortal Spirit in order to get that from her thief subjob. And it's definitely an attack that's really hard to line up and backstab an opponent with, so I really don't think it's worth the trade. All that said, I really don't see these units as competing directly with each other, but more so designed to work alongside of each other. And from that angle, I can definitely see them as a powerhouse 1-2 combo with the synergy that their vision cards can also provide them and the team. And I really think that they're positioned well to be competitive not only with what Global has in the meta right now, but also against some of the new damage threats that are going to be coming down the pipe very shortly. A majority of the incoming damage units that we know about are actually physical damage based. Now, if you're a manual PvP player, I think that she has a lot going for her there as well. She has that 4-move capability, high agility and bulk factor, access to Immortal Spirit, and multiple ways to bypass enemies' defenses. I do actually really like that charm resist on her as well, even at that 10% value, since in the Trust Zone era, you can easily equip a passive there and get that up to 35%. And this is definitely a unit that you're going to be running at 50 faith or lower, so definitely can make her very, very charm resistant, which is nice. But just as in the auto PvP arena, those accuracy and magic resist concerns that we talked about for Esther are definitely going to need to be mitigated. Additionally, the Earth casts, and in particular Ketone and Oberon, are still relatively high-picked units and units that you need to watch out for as well. What about PvE though? We already know how great Cloud is, in that environment with this 3-hit chaining attack. And as we talked about, Esther unfortunately doesn't have that available to her innately in her kit. She is though able to wear the Exorcist vision cards and gain access to a 3-hit attack that way. On top of that, she does have the imperils for both slash and single target resistance. Oh, she also has steal time on top of that as well. So if you have that vision card, I think that she can be transformed into a pretty amazing guild raid and chaining unit. So if PvE is your game and you really want a baller guild raid team for lightning, I think you definitely want to go for Esther. So what are you guys thinking out there? Did you already pull for Esther like I did? If so, how did it go? Definitely let me know in the comments down below. And what did you think of this comparison and the conclusion that I came to? Was there anything that I missed or overlooked? Definitely let me know about that too. And that's really all that I have to say today. So as always, stay safe out there, and I'll see you guys in the next one.